and welcome to Building Your First 2D Game Using GameMaker. My name is Daniel Egan. I'm a developer evangelist out of Southern California. I've been a developer evangelist for about 6 years. Prior to that, I was an enterprise developer. And so coming to gaming was a little bit different to me, but about 2 years ago, I decided to build a game. The game I came up with is called Dave in the Cave. You'll see a little bit about that today. And I used GameMaker to build it, and it's available on all 3 platforms. You can get it on iOS, you can get it on Android, you can get it, of course, on Windows Phone as well. Today with me is Natalie.
Hi, my name is Natalie Viernes. I'm also a tech evangelist. I'm located in the Dallas, Texas office. So I've been at Microsoft for almost 2 years now. Like Daniel, I also work with startups, students, and game developers with a special focus on game developers. Prior to Microsoft, I graduated from USC with a degree in engineering and also gained some experience at some other game companies. We're glad you're here today. Make sure that when you're watching, join the MVA community. There's a lot of great stuff there for you. You can get points for this. You can see everything on screen to be able to join up. Today, as we're working through stuff, we hope you can work through stuff with us. You're going to need a few things. You're going to need GameMaker Studio. You're going to need Inkscape. That's where we're going to draw some of our assets. It's going to be a lot of fun in that session. You're also going to need Spine. Spine is a tool that allows you to do skeletons. And you'll also need the starter kits as well. So the way the day is going to go today is we're going to start with kind of an intro into game development. So when we're talking about GameMaker, we kind of want to give you a little feel about what GameMaker is all about, what the IDE is like, and get you comfortable with the development environment. After that, we're going to go into some basics of collisions and events so that when you're working in the game environment, you can see how things move around and see how things move back and forth. Next, we're going to go to finding assets for your game. So when you build a game, you obviously need characters, you need blocks, you need things, enemies, you need things to fight against. And so when you're fighting against them, you need the assets to be able to do that. So first, we're going to show you how to find them on the internet. And then after that, the next module is we're going to show you how to create your own. So that one's going to be a lot of fun. After all that, we're going to have a session that brings it all together. So the assets you created, the assets you found, we'll show you how to bring them into the game and make the starter kits that we're going to show you your own game. So Natalie, you want to start out with the introduction, the agenda? So for Module 1, we're going to start out with a history of GameMaker, and then we'll look over the starter kits that we'll be using today and also that we provided online. Take a look at the programming languages that you can use with GameMaker, GML, and then we'll do a little loop around the IDE and look at how the tool works. And then lastly, we'll talk about the GameMaker store. So let's get started and talk about a little bit of history of GameMaker. So GameMaker was first created by a teacher named Mark Overmars, and it was a tool for creating 2D animations. And he had the intention of it being a drag and drop tool, so really simple to use. GameMaker actually started out being called Amino in 1999, and it grew from there to become what we know as GameMaker. And in 2007, they joined up with this company based out of Scotland called Yo-Yo Games. Fun fact, the CEO of that company is Sandy Duncan, who's actually was the Xbox VP, I believe. So just something fun to know about that. So what is GameMaker? GameMaker is a game environment for you to create your first game. It's really awesome because you don't need to have any programming experience, but if you wanted to do that, you could use GameMaker language. It also has an asset store, so if you're not an artist or you're not a programmer, you can find those parts to complement your game dev experience to make your first game. So let's look over a little bit at some cool games that have been made with GameMaker.
Okay, actually, we're going to, let's go ahead and do this instead. So we're going to jump over to my PC. One of the things you're going to see today is we're going through the starter kits. The starter kits are very simplistic. And they're very simplistic for a reason, because the starter kits are there to give you the basics that you need to get started. I don't want to overwhelm you with way too much stuff in a game. But the important thing that I like to make sure people know is the games we're showing you today don't show the full power of what GameMaker can give you. So if we look at on screen the showcase, if you go to yoyogames.com and go to the showcase, you'll see just tons of games and really cool games, very exciting, great graphics, cool interaction. And so when you get a chance, go ahead and check those out, and we'll see the great games that you can create with GameMaker. The next thing we want to talk about actually is the different types of GameMaker, because this is actually important. So on the Yo-Yo Games again, if you just go to the GameMaker tab, you'll notice down here the different types or the different tiers they have. So almost everything we're doing today, you're going to be able to do with the free standard edition. You can see the standard edition is, makes you register, but besides that, it gives you unlimited resources. It gives you the ability to create the game you want. It also allows you to export it to a Windows exe, so you can share your games with your friends. The one thing that we're going to show you today that you will not be able to do is the advertising. So you notice right here it says Developer Services Portal, and Developer Services Portal is kind of a hidden thing that means advertising and other stuff. So that's the one thing you won't be able to do today. But you'll notice if you wanted to actually export to Windows 8, you can jump over to the professional one. It's only $49. And then they have a Masters Collection. The Masters Collection allows you to do absolutely everything. Other than that, where you want to export the game can be done by just purchasing modules or jumping over. One of the cool things that's been added recently is both Xbox One and PlayStation export. So if you build your game in GameMaker, you can actually export to Xbox One. So that's actually a really cool feature. The last thing, and I do this may sound silly, but I've been in dev communities for a long, long time. And the ones that really thrive are the ones that have a great community to help fellow developers. And if you go to the support tab and jump over to community, you'll go over to their forums, and their forums are just absolutely fantastic. Developers, game developers that are there to help you with any questions you have. So if you get stuck on anything that you start trying based on what we're showing you today, make sure you jump over to the community, ask your question. There's people there to help you. So let's actually talk about the next part. So as we mentioned in the beginning, we have a few starter kits, and starter kits are something that allow you to not have to start from scratch. So starting from scratch is tough, just putting the character on there, throwing a block on there. It can take you a while to, get your platforms or get your maze built or get your endless runner. And actually, those are the three starter kits we have. We have a platform, a maze, and endless runner game, because those are traditionally the games that people like to build and that people like to play. So let's go ahead and show you those just a little bit. Let me bring that up. And we'll start with the platform. A lot of what we're going to be showing you today is going to be in the platformer game. We'll jump between a few of them, but I'll go ahead and run that. And you'll see that in my drop down here, I have the ability to run and put it on many different things. But we're just going to leave it at Windows and run the game, so you can get a feel for what we're going to be working with today. So these are fully complete games, and what I mean by that is they have a beginning, they have an end, they have a few levels, and then they have things that you need. So touch screen controls, left, right, the ability to move around and jump up and down, grab coins, all the stuff you'd expect to have, enemies that kill you, etc. And so we'll go through all these features. The next one we'll show you is, some people like a top-down maze game. So if we look at the maze game, again, there's your start screen, and you have the ability to find different stuff, to walk through the maze, unlock doors, obviously grab the key. I'll keep going until I grab the key. You can see that item shows down here. So again, these are made to give you the ability to see how something was built. And the last one I'll show you is the endless runner. Endless runners are fun, and quite honestly, after building Dave in the Cave, which we'll show you again today as well. Oh, let me change that. We'll actually show you how to fix that later and why that error came up. It's part of the Windows 8 development stuff. And so go ahead and click on this. Endless Runner's really cool because it allows you to actually create a game, got it. Allows you to create a game quickly that can last a while, because one of the things you'll learn when you're building games, if you're building a platformer game, the hardest part, in my opinion, was once I got the basics and the movements and everything else, was designing the levels and figuring out levels. And building 20 levels takes a long time, where an Endless Runner gives you the ability to do one and then just throw different stuff at them. So I actually enjoy Endless Runners quite a bit. Okay, so one of the interesting things that Natalie mentioned earlier, she mentioned drag and drop. So there's two different ways to actually build a game in GameMaker. One is using GML, which is their GameMaker language, and then one is through drag and drop. And originally, like she said, the game was made for his students, and he wanted them to easily be able to, not write C++ code, but to drag and drop different items and give them the ability to create a game, get the excitement of building a game, and quite honestly, be very sneaky in teaching them programming. Because even in the drag and drop, you're talking about if loops and variables and stuff like that, but in a drag and drop way. So I'm going to show you just quickly a little difference between the two. So let's go to this game, and I'll show you what this is. This is like a half-made game. You'll see the full version of this game later. But you can see that I have a little guy that can jump around. Traditional platform game. Not much here, just the basic blocks for him to land on. And if we look at this, let's go ahead and open up this room. And we'll go through these things a little more later. You'll notice that if I hover over him, I need to start up zoom it so you can see this. If I put my mouse over him, you'll see that right down here on the bottom, he is a object player D&D. So he's a drag and drop player, and it's named that because I named him that. But if we actually look at the objects themselves, we can see there's two, and we'll talk about objects in a little bit. But there's two players, and it doesn't matter which player actually dropped in the room. Because if we look at them, let's open up the drag and drop, and we look at the regular object player, we can see that there's two ways to do everything. So in the drag and drop guy, you can see that every single thing is something that I've dragged over from the toolbox, whereas the one that's using GML, I'm actually writing code. Now, we're not going to dive deep into the code today, but the interesting thing about GML in GameMaker is that originally, like I said, he did drag and drop, but he wanted to make it easier for developers to do some simple advanced stuff using code instead of drag and drop. But what has happened over the years is most developers are using GML instead of drag and drop. You'll find that in the forums. You'll find that when you're talking to developers. It started out as just a kind of side thing, but it grew and grew to be able to allow developers to do some really cool stuff, some advanced stuff using GameMaker. So while we're in the IDE, I think it's important, and Natalie's going to help me here, whenever you open up a new development environment like this, for me, I'm comfortable with this. I've been using it for a while. But if you think about the first time that you used Visual Studio, if you think the first time you open it up, you're just like, wow, what are all these things? What are all these panels? And GameMaker can be, the same as that, where you're looking at it and you have no idea where to start. So what we're going to do is just give you a little lap around the IDE so you get comfortable with it. So Natalie, you want to start on that?
Yeah. So if we look over here on the left, we have what you could call the tree. So if we zoom into the top, we have our sprites here, and they have the little crosses, and you can expand those to see what all we have going on here. So if we go over to sprites, we have our list of sprites here. I'm looking at the platform game starter kit. So if you wanted to create a new sprite, you could right-click on the tree and do create sprite, or you can go up to the top and do resources, create sprite there. So let's just take a look at one of the ones that we already have in here. Here we have our sprite player idle, and you'll notice here that we have a really clear naming convention, because if you have maybe like a lot of levels or a lot of characters in your game, you want to keep those organized, just, you know, good development practices. So
these are the assets in your game. This is your character. These are your blocks. These are the enemies. Yes, you have to draw them so they can interact.
Yeah, so here we have like the main player and also our little crab enemy. So you can load it as sprite over here, and we'll look more into detail later about how you can actually put in your own sprites and do all the editing with those. But here you can see that you can change the origin on your sprite. So we just have it at the center here, but maybe you wanted your sprite to turn from the side or something. So this is just basically how you put in your sprite, and, you know, save any changes here with the green OK button. So also in the tree we have sounds and backgrounds. Putting those in works pretty similarly to the same way that sprites do. Right click or up at the resources to put one in there. We can take a look at some of the sounds that we've got in here right now. Let's look at the explosion. So just double click to open it, and you can preview the sounds here. Let's see. So we've got our explosion sound. Let's look at the warp portal. So we've got some fun sounds in here, and those can really add life to your game, whether you wanted to do, you know, like a level up sound, or maybe the sound of your enemy exploding or something like that. We can also hop over to backgrounds, and here we can see we have a background for our main game. As you can see when we play the game, Daniel showed it earlier, we had that really cool starry dark blue background. And having a nice background can really make or break your game, because it really adds to the experience. If we just had like a solid gray background, it wouldn't be as fun as this awesome dark blue thing that Daniel created.
Yeah, we're going to show you some very simple backgrounds in our games, but background, if it has a little depth, even if it has the parallax effect where backgrounds are moving at different speeds, really just adds depth to a very simple game and can make the difference between just an okay game and a great game. The next thing we're going to look at is, let me do here.
We've got paths next.
Yeah, paths right here. So paths are interesting. Paths are used not all the time, but a maze game that I showed you earlier is a great example of this. You can see that I have a placeholder here for a scarab. In the maze game, the scarab is the enemy, and the scarab's going to walk through the maze itself, and I have to avoid him. So I want him to walk on a very specific path. And so in paths, you'll see that in here that you can see that he'll start where you saw him in the room, and he's going to go up and down and up and down, and he'll go back and forth. Now, this is a very simplistic one. I actually used this in Dave in the Cave to create a trolley system where he ran and jumped into a trolley and took the trolley through the whole level of mine. And so it's a great way to have an object that follows a very specific path. The next thing we're going to look at is the next one down. And it's very actually simplistic. So even if you're doing drag and drop, you're going to, at one point, probably want to write a little bit of code. And so you're able to do that using scripts. So scripts allow you to write a little bit of code that from the drag and drop area, you can actually call that script, do some advanced functionality, and move on from there. So that's scripts. The next thing is shaders. So shaders we're just kind of going to talk about. Shaders is an advanced topic, and shaders just allow you to do really cool stuff with colors. And what I mean by that is instead of just, you know, the color blue, it allows you to put like shimmers on waters, and it allows you to take an image and move it like through the day as it gets darker during the day. The colors and the bleeding on the colors you chose for your character can get a little darker to reflect the room or the time of day in there. Again, they're a little advanced subjects, so we're not going to cover them in this session, but shaders are really cool. The next thing we're going to talk about is fonts. And fonts, quite simply, are when you want to draw something in your game, when you want to do a level screen, when you want to put some text out there, the fonts allow you to not just use the standard fonts, Arial, the stuff that you're used to, but you can create your own custom fonts so that your game has its own custom look. And that's where you'll find on fonts. And then timelines. Timelines actually have a timeline in the Endless Runner. So let's open that up. And timelines allow you to do stuff at specific times. So you can see a step is every time a game loop runs. And so we'll talk about that when we dive a little bit more into code. But the step function is your game loop that runs every 30 times a second, up to 60 times a second. And so this is letting me do stuff at every step that I decide. I'm going to create an instance of the cactus, create an instance of the fire arrow, create an instance of the bad guy. So as they were coming out in the game, I decided when they were coming out. Now you can randomize this instead of doing a timeline, but this is one great use of a timeline. Now the next section, so we've gone through most of this pretty quickly, again to make you comfortable. This next section, your objects, this is where you're going to spend most of your time, and I'm actually going to go back to the platformer game to look at that, because we're going to look at object player. And again, Natalie said earlier that one of the things you want to do is sometimes if you're a beginning developer, this is the first time you've ever developed something, you'll see a lot of code where you'll see a lot of X variables and Y variables and zeros and ones, etc. Some of the stuff we're going to show you today is meant to show you how to organize stuff and how to create your variables in a way that not only you can read them when you come back to it, in a year to write more on your game, but other people that may be coding with you can understand what's going on. So you can see we have stuff in a nice file structure. And if we open up Object Player, the objects are where you're going to spend most of your time. So the objects in your game will utilize the sprites. You can see that I have set a sprite here. I can choose which one I want. It's this, the idle sprite to start. But here is, if you are a developer, these are like objects. GameMaker tries to be an OOP type of language, but it's missing stuff, it's missing classes, it's missing structs. But if you think of objects like you're maybe used to thinking of objects, you instantiate them. And in this create event, Natalie will talk about events in a little bit, and the create event is where you're going to instantiate things. Objects are the way you interact with the world. And objects interact together and against each other, and we'll talk more about that. They actually need somewhere to interact in, and so that would be rooms, and Natalie can show you a little around there.
So if we look over at the room tree, you'll see that we have the start splash, level 1, level 2. So the room section is actually ordered by how you have it here in the hierarchy. So it's going to open with the splash, and then you want to have it in order of the levels that you want it to play in. So I was just messing around before and making some new rooms that we've got down here, but if let's say I wanted room 10 to actually be my level 1, I would move that up to the top. So you can basically think of rooms as levels in your game. So, I would put that up there if I wanted that to open up, and I'd create a room the same way that I've been creating the other things in my game here. Right-click, create room. And then when you're in here, you can scale it, you can rotate it, and we'll be able to add in other things like backgrounds and objects a little bit later on. But if we go back and look at the start splash room that we have, you can see here that we have one of these little question marks up in the corner. So those are actually objects that don't have any visual representation. But if you hover over it, we can see at the bottom that it is the object splash click. So down, well, now it's not there, but at the very bottom of the screen, you can see that it says object splash click. And then it gives you a little preview here of what your room looks like and what you've created. And just one thing about using GameMaker, if you want to zoom in, you can scroll in with your mouse, and you can pan like you would on other things by holding down your mouse wheel if you're using a mouse. So we touched on this a little bit earlier about how GameMaker has a really awesome asset store. So if you're not an artist or you're not a programmer and you want to find those other things to fill your game, you don't have to be held up by trying to create your own amazing art if that's not something you're interested in. So GameMaker has the asset store. So I'm just going to pull that up here. So the marketplace has a lot of things in here that you can buy. There's some free stuff. You can pay for it also. So anyone with a GameMaker license is able to use the store here. If you have a GameMaker Pro license, you can actually sell your own assets on here. GameMaker gets 30% of that, but that is also a really cool way for you if you are an artist or a programmer that wants to put some of your work out there and make some revenue. You can use that too, to put it into the marketplace, as well as making some money off your own game.
Yeah, actually, in Dave in the Cave, one of the things I had wanted to do, if you play Dave in the Cave, you'll notice that he jumps a lot, and he climbs down ropes, but they're very static ropes. One of the things I wanted to do, he's in a cave, I wanted him to swing back and forth on a rope, and I actually had a really difficult time making that look real, so you'll see that it's not in my game. If you look in the GameMaker store, one of the things that they have, and I actually think it's a free one, is a whole extension pack that shows you how to do ropes. So if that would have been around when I built the game, I would have definitely bought that and incorporated it in my game. So those are the kinds of things that you can expect and look for in the GameMaker store that can be helpful to you.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Since there's already so many things going on with game development, you don't want to get stuck there. So now that we've gone over the history of GameMaker and taken a loop around the IDE, we've looked at drag and drop versus the GameMaker language and also talked about the awesome marketplace. We're just going to take a 10-minute break and then we'll go into all of this in more detail in 10 minutes.
See you in a bit.